Welcome everyone to the 5th anniversary, the 5th annual Safer Internet Day conference held by Bradford District Credit Union. And can I just say that Bradford District Credit Union was one of the very first to adopt online banking, and then the Safer Internet Day came off the back of that to help members to stay safe. So I'm absolutely delighted to be with you. And for those of you who I don't know, I'll just say that I am the chair of ABCUL's Inclusivity Group. I am a credit union futures judge. I was chair of the Credit Union Foundation, and I also chair sessions at most annual conferences, and I will be chairing the annual conference, the ABCUL conference, again in March. So I have had quite a long connection with the credit union movement. Now, we've got an awful lot to get through in the next couple of hours. So just to say, on a housekeeping basis, really, there's very little in terms of housekeeping, because you know where your own loo is. You know that you're on mute already. If you do want to pose a question, then please pose the question on there's a little questions icon. If you post questions, we'll be able to read them, which will be absolutely great. There will be some polls coming up as we go through the session today. Very, very intuitive and easy to answer those, but we'd be very, very grateful if you were to help us out with that by answering those polls. So no need to tell you to stay on mute with your phone, because your phone won't be heard even if it does ring in the background. And I just hope that you really enjoy the session. So let me introduce our first speaker. Now, our first speaker is Councillor Doreen Lee. She has been Lord Mayor for the past 2 years. She became a councillor in 2007 and is the Area Planning Panel Chair for Keighley and Shipley, and was an assistant whip for 8 years within the Labour group. Councillor Lee is also a member of the Bradford District Credit Union, and so has a great connection with credit unions. She supports the Hainsworth Community Centre, and she's a director of the Keighley Asian Women's and Children's Centre. And other causes close to her heart are Down syndrome charities and older people's forums. So please welcome Doreen Lee, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, right. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I am a member of the credit union. I'm very proud to be so. And so is my granddaughter, who is 18. She's been a member since she was a young teenager. So we're very proud to be members of credit union. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And as Lord Mayor of Bradford, I'm delighted to give a warm welcome to the community practitioners from all over the UK to the Bradford District Credit Union's 5th annual Safety Internet Day conference. That's a big mouthful, really. Promoting responsible internet use and securing smartphone banking. Now, this year marks the first as a national web air, so it's now a major event, and I think we've got about 160 people booked online. The Bradford Credit Union is now seen as a role model for the financial inclusion partnership work and leads the anti-poverty events group that's been helped to pool ideas and resources for a wider anti-poverty agenda in the district, with the credit union as its anchor. Bradford Council supports this work by funding the Financial Inclusion Development Officer. Today's conference will explore how those in poverty and new to the digital world can be at risk by scammers and loan sharks becoming more sophisticated in their attempts to make money from the vulnerable. You will hear from the Citi Bank of London about keeping people safe online. At the time of the COVID isolation, I think it's more important than ever to know how to spot fake news and to get information that we can all use to keep safe and keep informed. And not to forget that we still need to use the non-digital ways of doing this also. Today's conference will include 3 case studies of projects from across the West Yorkshire area, exploring a pioneering digital current app for volunteers supported by Bradford Council, health transformation, and the Kerkley's digital inclusion programme about connecting residents online. The Safer Internet Day started out as an NEU project, I think it was in 2004, to promote safer ways of browsing the internet, and also highlighting its dangers, and how it's now is an annual internet event. Bradford Credit Union, which started by the council in 1993, held its first conference 5 years ago, in partnership with Barclays Bank, to explore the links between the financial and the digital inclusion. Partnership working has meant that membership now has more than doubled from 3,000 to 8,000 members today. Wow, that's a lot. Helping people to access low-cost loans and save for the futures and try to become financially resilient. Bradford Credit Union was one of the first unions to adopt online banking in 2015. And this Safer Internet Day conference was a way to help both members and community learn how to stay safe when the internet, when interneting or surfing the banking online. Each year since Safer Internet Day, the conference has grown in popularity, and conference held last year in Kerkley and Bradford on the Anti-Poverty Events Group project, which had over 200 people attending. The Anti-Poverty Events Group is made up of 8 organisations: the Bradford District Credit Union, the Arts Creative Communities, People Can, Bernardo's, the CNT Carers Resource, Stronger Families, and Bradford Council. So this webinar today launches their next partnership, which is going to be called Everyone Matters and Everyone Counts, which will send fun activity packs to about 10,000 vulnerable families, and they're designed and distributed by the Artworks Creative Communities. And this will be able to promote the internet safety and saving and borrowing safely online through the credit union. Here in Bradford, we're well known for using our creative collaborations and partnerships to support the digital inclusion and anti-poverty work, which is key priority to ensuring that all our residents have a good life and achieve their full potential. We have multi-agency anti-poverty coordination groups to oversee our responses to the challenges poverty brings. This is set up by Ian Brewer at the credit union, Helen Johnston at the council, to help some of the priorities, and particularly around financial inclusion. Today we celebrate best practice together, and we're delighted to have secured some great online speakers from across the Bradford and Kirklees districts. I would like to give my special thanks to the BBC presenter Liz Barclay for hosting this event, and to the credit union trade body, to ABCUL, for providing the digital platform. Please take your time to ask questions and to chat. They'll all be answered at the end of the webinar. So I do hope you will all enjoy this event. And I encourage everybody, keep the good work going. The credit union is marvellous. Thank you.
Councillor Doreen Lee, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. It's well seen that passion for credit unions shines through there. I think it's fair to say that most of the people who work for the credit union movement are passionate about it. So thank you very much for being so positive and opening the conference today. It's been a delight to have you. Normally we would give you a round of applause, so please take it as read. Thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Can I just say that
I
I have to leave you now, unfortunately, because I have other events to do, but thank you for having me. In normal circumstances, I would be staying with you. Thank you.
Well, in normal circumstances, you would be extremely welcome, but thank you very, very much indeed. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we are going to have now a session on fake news and cybersecurity, and I can promise you that we have a proper speaker to talk about fake news, not Donald Trump. We then have a session on digital inclusion and poverty, which is something very close to my heart, because as a financial inclusion commissioner, I am absolutely determined that digital inclusion is part of the answer. We then have a series of 3 case studies. So let me introduce our first speakers on fake news and cybersecurity. They are Danielle King and Amy-Anne Fairhurst. I'll talk to you about Danielle King, and then after her presentation, I will introduce Amy-Anne Fairhurst. So Danielle King taught history in secondary schools for 20 years before leaving teaching to work as a prevent education officer in Bradford, supporting schools to help young people to build resilience to extremism and radicalisation. And Danielle currently works as Bradford's prevent coordinator. Danielle, very welcome. You're on mute, unfortunately, Danielle. Sorry, it's the phrase of the lockdown, isn't it?
Should be fine now, Danielle.
Okay. So you can hear me now? Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And can I just check? Can you see my screen? Can you see my PowerPoint? Fantastic. Yes. Okay. Right. So I just need to move this down. Fantastic. So I'm going to talk to you today on fake news and conspiracy theories and scams. And there are going to be a series of polls throughout so we can get a bit of interaction. And Jackie's going to help us with those as and when they come up. So just to move on to my next one. Hopefully you can see the next one. So today's objectives, we're going to look at what fake news, conspiracy theories and scams are, why we're falling for these, and also learn how we can build our resilience to them and how we can encourage our critical thinking. So we're going to start off, you sort of preempted me before, with this gentleman, Donald Trump. We can see he's looking very pleased with himself there. And the reason that I put him there was because he used the phrase fake news quite a lot, really, during his time in office. So I thought it might be quite good if we did our starter based on Donald Trump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 4 little quotations which are all attributed to Donald Trump at one time or another, and I'd just like you to read through them there. And Jackie has our first poll, and I'd like you to read through them, and once you have, to decide which, if any, you think are false, or which one you think is the false one. So the first one, if I were to run, I'd run as a Republican. They're the dumbest group of voters in the country. They believe anything on Fox News. I could lie and they'd still eat it up. B, it's freezing and snowing in New York. We could do with some global warming. C, the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. And D, if I ever ran for office, I'd do better as a Democrat than as a Republican. Not because I'd be more liberal, because I'm conservative, but the working guy would elect me, he likes me, and the cabbies yell out of the windows at me. So if you can vote on the poll, which ones you think are true or false. that would be great. Jackie, I think, is the poll open?
The poll is up, Danielle. You probably can't see it. But yeah, people are voting.
Fantastic.
So which of the clips are true recommendations?
Okay, so I can't actually see the wording on the poll. Apologies for that one. But in terms of the poll, Jackie, if you could just tell me how the questions are set out.
So we've got which of the clips are true, A, B, C, or D.
Okay,
yes,
so what
problems with the wording, didn't we?
So what are we seeing? Which ones do people think are
true? So we've got 66% voting coming in. So 81% A, 62% B, 61% C, and 54% D. So we've got 70% of the attendees voted at the moment.
Okay, so we've got quite high percentages on each one being true, really, by the sounds of it. And usually when I do this, that does tend to be the case. Now, if I was to ask you, you know, why people have voted on different things, quite often people might vote on things because it sounds like something that somebody will say. Or they might vote on things because it matches what somebody believes. So we know that Donald Trump doesn't really believe in global warming, so maybe that might tie into C and D. We know that he's quite controversial in the things that he says, so he might say something quite shocking. And so it's very, very difficult to pick out which one is true and which one is false. Well, in actual fact, of all four of them, three of them are actually true. If you voted B, C, or D, all of those are true. B and C, he said both of those on Twitter. So if you look on Twitter archives, you'll see that that's the case and that comes up. And D, he actually said that in an interview in Playboy magazine in the 1990s, a long time before he became president. A isn't actually true. But whenever I do this poll, lots and lots of people believe this to be true, and lots of people even say that they remember seeing this on social media, and they believe it to be true because it sounds like something he would say. And the reason that I use this example is it's incredibly difficult to tell on social media whether or not something is true or false just at face value, just from looking at it. And the people who want to exploit us, if you like, they know this. They know this, and so they often use social media to try and get their viewpoints across, because they know it's really, really difficult, and it's really easy to fool people into believing things if they sound like they should be true. So I'm going to go on to the next slide now, so hopefully we can see this. And this is the fake news. So fake news is usually split into three different kinds of information. That's misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Now, if we look at these examples, there's another example here for a poll, true or false. You can protect yourself from COVID by eating garlic, by getting lots of sunshine, and by not eating ice cream. So I think the poll should be open for that one. So if people can vote on that, and then if Jackie can tell me what we can see from those polls, that would be great.
So you can protect yourself from COVID by A, eating garlic, B, sunshine, C, not eating ice cream.
And what are we seeing? Are people do people believe any of these to be true?
Looks like the sunshine's winning at the moment.
Okay.
So I've got 63% again, people voted.
Okay, so we've got quite a few people voting. So if you believe, so I'm just moving on to the next slide there. So they're all untrue. But if you believe any of that, then you've been misinformed. And what misinformation is it's untrue information which is created and shared as if it was true. So it's something that you'll see online. There's no intention to actually cause harm, but it can cause harm. People might, for example, in this case, feel too safe because they're doing things and end up putting themselves or others at risk, getting COVID. At best, you'll be missing out on ice cream. There's no scientific proof that any of those things are true, but people have spread that information anyway because people want to believe it's true. They want to believe there's a simple, straightforward cure. Sometimes it might have been recommended by a particular person or a group, so they believe it must be true and they don't check it out as they should. On the one hand, we've seen misinformation being shared online in the form of misleading advice or statistics, sometimes spread by well-meaning but ill-informed individuals. Sometimes there's been a proliferation of fake news stories, spread in large part by the public themselves, circulating online claims about potential cures for COVID, origins of the outbreak, for example, or the authorities' responses. We've sometimes seen ill-informed conspiracy theories linking 5G technology to the outbreak, and this has led to those 5G towers being attacked. So we have seen an awful lot of misinformation. And that brings us on to this next bit, this next slide. So this is another true or false one. COVID was started by the US, who infected China with it. That's A. B. Chinese biological warfare. Or C. Bill Gates and the big pharmaceutical companies. So again, there's another little poll there for you to vote on. If you just give you a couple of minutes to vote on that, and then if Jackie can just tell us percentage-wise what the results are, if people believe in these, and if they do, which one?
Yeah, so COVID was started by the US, who infected China with it, Chinese biological welfare, Bill Gates and the pharmaceutical companies, and none of the above. So we've got 70% have started, and majority of the vote is none of the above.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. That's great. So yes, the first one, the US who infected China with it, that came from a rumour basically, which was the response of the Chinese after some people in America had blamed people in China. Some people in China said the US Army had deliberately infected Wuhan during the military games in 2019. So it was a Chinese response to that. Chinese biological warfare was another example of a theory of how COVID was started. It was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan. But genetic sequencing showed that COVID wasn't in any way linked to any of the research in Wuhan. Some people have blamed Bill Gates for it and said the anti-vaccination group don't like the fact that Bill Gates was pushing for vaccination. And lots of people blamed him and said that he was responsible for releasing it so that he could make money with some sort of vaccination and potentially track people based on that. But if you believe, and I've just gone on to the next slide now, if you believe any of that, you've been disinformed. Disinformation is untrue information that's created and shared in order to deceive or harm a person or an organisation or a social group. It's created by groups and countries and people with their own agenda to further their own aims. And sadly, we see disinformation all over the internet, all over social media, but it's particularly been focused around COVID because people see that they can really, really capitalise on COVID to get their own agendas across. And it's incredibly dangerous. It leads to mistrust, hate and violence against particular groups. It prevents progress. And it means that people don't take the recommended action like social distancing or vaccination. It can be very dangerous. So we're seeing a lot of intentional malicious disinformation to get particular agendas across, and it's made much more dangerous because of the speed at which fake news spreads during a crisis and the amount of people that it can get to. So, you know, this is really prevalent at the moment. We've seen the use of bot accounts, which is spreading false information about the pandemic, and the use of COVID-19 as a theme in phishing campaigns to compromise victims and infiltrate organisations. More of that later. And some of it is malinformation. Malinformation is true or partly true information that is shared with the intention of causing harm to a person or an organisation or a social group. So what they do with malinformation is take something which is true and wrap a lie around it. So in lots of ways, people believe it because they know that some elements of it are true. So they believe that all of it must be true. So we can see some examples here. Bill Gates, during the Ebola crisis, did make some statements talking about in the future there may very well be viruses which mutate, which can cause devastation to our world. And he did indeed say that. And some people have taken that as an indication that he must have known about COVID, even though there's no evidence about that. You can see that there's a picture there of some people in a mosque, and this picture was used as proof that BAME communities, particularly Muslim communities, were responsible for spreading COVID because they weren't observing social distancing. Well, the picture is a real picture, but it wasn't taken during the COVID pandemic, and it wasn't taken during any lockdown. So there was no need for anybody to be observing social distancing. So this is malinformation. Now, if you just consider all of those, misinformation, disinformation and malinformation, they all add up to fake news. I'd be interested to know in our next poll, which of the above you think is the most dangerous to our world at the moment. So if you can just look at the next poll, I'd like to know your opinions. There's no particular right or wrong answer. It's just interesting to know, to share that. So if we can vote on that. Misinformation, disinformation or malinformation, and then if Jackie can tell us the results.
Quite an interesting one. So we're to 50%, 54%, and the majority vote is the malinformation.
I have to say, I agree with that, and you know, I think a lot of people will say the malinformation, and I think it's because with malinformation people grasp onto the true elements, and they're much more likely to believe that everything is true just because there is a little bit of truth there. But I think, you know, that we all have to be very, very aware of all three when we're online and we are being sent information, because it is so dangerous. But I have to say I would agree with the malinformation as well. Now, fake news can also lead, this is the next slide, to conspiracy theories. And we've all heard these, haven't we? Conspiracy theories are all over our world. They always have been, but much more so now than ever before. They work best when we're coping with a threat like now. They work best when we feel powerless. We can't explain what's happening, when we don't like what we're being told to do. And it often tells us that we need to blame somebody, that people are out to get us, that there's some sort of secret explanation, that we shouldn't do what the political leaders are telling us to do. And it's defined by 4 characteristics. It's usually a group acting in secret to alter institutions or usurp power or hide the truth or gain utility at the expense of the common good. I've put, for the next poll, 5 conspiracy theories there. I just want you to have a look at them, and there's no judgment at all, and nobody will know what you've answered. Just have a look and see how many of these you might believe. You might believe all of them. You might believe between 1 and 4. You might believe none. So 9/11 was an inside job. Princess Diana was killed by the royal family. The moon landings were a hoax. Aliens crashed in Roswell. And the Illuminati exists and its members control the world. So if you can vote on that now, please, what people think in terms of conspiracy theories. And then Jackie can tell us whether or not people believe all of them, or some of them, or none of them?
We're up to 55% people voted, 61%, and majority is believe none of them.
Ah, interesting. Believe none of them. So that's music to my ears. But I think, you know, the wider that we cast the net, the more that people do sort of tend to believe in quite a lot of conspiracy theories, because they offer people knowledge that most people are ignorant of. And we all like to think that we know the truth when the majority of people are ignorant about it. And what they don't do, unfortunately, is they don't consider all the evidence. They only put forward the little bits of evidence that back up their position. And people who want to get across an extremist narrative or a very extreme viewpoint do exactly the same. They pick and choose evidence that supports their idea and dismiss anything that goes against their single-minded worldview. So the only way, really, to protect ourselves against all this fake news and this critical thinking is to all these conspiracy theories, is to develop our critical thinking. So the critical thinking can be described as the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. It's about using your ability to reason, becoming an active learner rather than a passive recipient, asking questions, don't make assumptions, don't accept things at face value, and demand to have evidence, and don't just act on gut instinct. Stop, think and react. So there is no pressure when you are sent something online to react immediately. You don't have to share things immediately. You don't have to like things immediately. Consider, think, take a breath, have a look at what you're reading, put it into context. Could sharing it have consequences? And all these things will mean that we're much less likely to fall for fake news and conspiracy theories. So what I've included there are 6 critical questions that we need to ask ourselves. So who sent it? You know, consider that. Who sent it? Is it somebody you know? Is it someone famous? Is it someone in authority? What exactly have they said? Is it facts? Is it opinions? Have they left something out? Where did they say it? Was it in public? Was it in private? Did they give others the chance to look at the other side? When did they say it? Was it before or after or during an important event? Remember the picture at the mosque? The timing of that was crucial. Why did they say it? What was their mood at the time? Are they angry with somebody? Consider that. And how did they say it? Is it written? Is it spoken? Could you understand it? Were they happy? Were they sad? So consider those things. Bradford Council have a strategy called Make Sure It All Adds Up. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Think before you share. Make sure it adds up and check before you retweet. And they've also got something called ABC for critical thinking. Ask, is it relevant? Base, look at whether or not it's factual and what we know already, and check it out to make sure you can trust the source. And there are 5 ways there to reduce rumours. Think before you share and check before you retweet. Suggest other people think before they share. Learn more about the subject. Share ways to learn with others and understand and share facts. Very quickly, the other thing that I've been asked to look at is scams. The COVID pandemic has really provided an opportunity for scammers to target vulnerable people with this fake news, and there's quite a few doing the rounds at the moment. I'm just very quickly going to go through these. First of all, there's a coronavirus support text, and they're very, very convincing. Ofcom provided an example of a text you can see there. It's a phishing scam. So put your postcode in, you might be able to get some COVID relief, but you can spot it if you look at the URL. While the website design is a good likeness of the real deal, the link is not to the UK government website. So if you get a coronavirus support text and it isn't linked to the government website, it's not real. If you get a text saying you might be fined for leaving the house during the lockdown, just be aware, any genuine correspondence would never ask for personal banking information, and this one does. The official texts come from UK/gov, and the wording on all the messages is the same. If you get a message that's different to that, then it is not an official government message, and it is a scam. There are also calls claiming your broadband will be disconnected, but Ofcom would never call you out of the blue like that. If you receive a call like that, any kind of a recorded message, it's definitely not real. Okay, so just be aware of that. Coronavirus tracking app scams. Again, people are mimicking the government's coronavirus tracking app. It takes you through to a website where you're asked to put your personal information, but you would never, ever be asked to put your banking details into anything where somebody has contacted you in that way. The Chartered Trading Standards Institute would never ask you to do that, so it's definitely fake. Vaccination scams as well, saying that you're eligible for COVID vaccine, pressing a number key on your telephone or clicking a link. These calls are designed to extract your personal information and details about your identity. Again, the NHS would never contact you by phone, would never ask for your personal or financial details in that way. The best way to be reassured is to call your GP surgery if you think that you might be eligible for a vaccine. And this one, I've actually received this myself. People have been tricked into handing over their bank details by saying that they are due a tax refund, and it looks incredibly realistic. It really, really does. But if you look at it carefully, you can see that there are spelling mistakes. They haven't put an N in government, and they put a tax refund, instead of saying of, they've put off. And you know, so a government or an official text like this would never have a spelling mistake in, so that's a clear red flag. So please don't be taken in by that one, because I think that one is quite common. So there are some final words there, which I'll just let you have a look at. If a man will begin with certainties, he shall end in doubts. If he will be confident to begin with doubts, he shall end in certainties. So if we don't think that we know everything, you know, and strive to get to the truth, we eventually will. Just because you've seen or heard something, just because it's spoken or rumoured, just because it's written down, don't necessarily believe it. And that comes from Buddha. And to understand the actual world as it is, not as we should wish it to be, is the beginning of wisdom, Bertrand Russell. And I'd just like to leave you with the words of an American president, another American president, Abraham Lincoln. I think this is particularly poignant in view of everything that we're going through at the moment. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danielle. That was absolutely fascinating. And it did make me wonder, as a teacher, whether or not you think there is enough critical thinking taught in schools. So sorry, I come back to my journalistic training: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Thank you for reminding me of that. Absolutely fascinating. Let me introduce Amy-Anne Fairhurst. Amy-Anne is Managing Director of Cyber Crisis Management at Citi Bank, currently responsible for Europe, Middle East and Africa's regional cyber investigation program, leading a team of investigators and digital forensic specialists. Amy-Anne, welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much, Liz. First of all, I start with an apology. You should never start with an apology. I'm sorry you guys can't see me today. Technical issues, they can get to the lot of us. I want to pick up where Danielle left off, because I love the idea of spending a little bit of time talking about critical thinking. I love the idea of spending a little bit of time talking about silly things that we all are tempted to do on the internet. And I want to start off with, are you going to get phished? So Danielle just spoke a little bit about phishing. What really is phishing at its core? It's an attempt to bait somebody into giving up sensitive information like bank details. It's usually over email, but it can be over text message or over telephone. And it's a serious problem in our cyber community. I think all of you will probably recognise the sorts of emails from HMRC, from the TV licensing people, from Amazon that Danielle's talking about that contain spelling errors and are trying to bait you to give up sensitive information like bank details. And you may very well turn around to me and say, look, Amy-Anne, why do you think I'm going to fall for that? And you're right. Do you know what? You might well not. Maybe we've moved on from Nigerian prince scammers and we know that that guy's probably not in distress. Maybe we are now more attuned to not clicking the link from any unsolicited email that come in. But you are more than likely to fall for spear phishing scams. And when I say more than likely, I mean more than 50% of people will open them, and of those, more than 50% will click the links. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at why that would be. So, okay, you say I'm going to fall for spear phishing, Amy-Anne, but what is spear phishing? This is about a targeted attempt to bait somebody into giving up sensitive information like bank details. It's more than just a generic email that's sent out across the board where you're relying on sending it to a huge heap of people by volume and somebody falling for it. Spear phishing is about making a convincing approach to somebody via email, via text message, via telephone, which uses data that the perpetrator already knows about that individual, about their behaviours, or about them themselves, in order to make the approach more convincing. Once we've got past the first level of critical thinking, the sort of thing that Danielle was talking about, does it look plausible? Does it have spelling errors? Is it using my name? We start getting towards targeted approaches which are much more difficult to spot. But the thing that I really want to talk to you about today is that very, very often the victim, that's you or me, is giving that information away for free. I can hear on the next slide you telling me that you most certainly do not do that. And I'm glad to hear it. I'm going to assume that most of the people who are listening here have some element of digital savvy, that you're here because you find the topic interesting and compelling, and therefore you know that you're not supposed to post pictures of your driving license on the internet, and that when you take a photograph and post it on Facebook, you make sure that your house number, for example, isn't in the background of the shot. But maybe a couple of you are just about to log into Facebook and delete some of those shots that you've been slightly less than comfortable with. But do you know what? You might. If I look at the screenshots that I've taken on the next slide, I'm going to introduce you to one of my favourite bad behaviours on the internet. So I don't know if you've all seen these kind of polls. This one here is to name your own signature cocktail. It's posted purportedly by a organic distillery. It may have been, I don't know. And the idea here is that you think of the colour of your first car and the name of your first pet. I know you're all doing it right now. And that gives you your cocktail name. And you can see there some people who I've taken away for the purpose of the privacy, their names, but there's no need. This is entirely public information on Facebook. Anybody can look at this. There's somebody there who's got a grey cheetah, somebody that's got a brown smoky. I think I quite fancy an orange daisy if I'm honest, but I'm going to avoid the silver windy if that's all the same with everybody here. But what we've got here is a bunch of information that's connected to real Facebook accounts that tells me some specific and quite personal information about those users. I know the colour of their first car, and I know the name of their first pet. They've also not posted this to their own private Facebook account. Their privacy settings won't really matter here because they've posted this as a comment on somebody else's post, which means at the very least, that person must have made this post public so that all these people could access it, and this content then becomes public information. So even if I was really generous and imagined that all the people who have invented their signature cocktail have got their privacy settings on Facebook locked down, so I can't see pictures of their children outside their front door with the door number on going to school on the 4th of September, I will be able to see that their first car was red and that the name of their first pet was Taco. But why does it matter, you might say? Who cares what the colour of their first car is or the name of their first pet? It's entirely trivial information. And it is, except that this is exactly the sort of question that you are asked to create answers to for security information, for multi-factor authentication security, for example, when you log into your bank account. It might ask you the name of the street you grew up on. It might ask you the name of your first pet. It might ask you the colour of your first car. It might ask you the name of your first teacher. It might ask you your nickname. And you can usually, it used to ask you, by the way, your mother's maiden name. We tend to ask that less frequently these days because it's, again, a very find outable piece of information, right? You tend now to be able to choose between these other rather silly but personalised questions. And this gives fraudsters the opportunity to make an attempt to contact you. Hello, I'm Virgin Media. I know you've got an account with me. Your security question is the name of your first pet. The answer is Windy. I need you to connect to your account through this link and alter your payment details because they've expired. And what it does is it adds plausibility to the solicitation with information that you have given away. Okay, you're all sat there thinking, look, Amy-Anne, I accept that I know somebody who does this or other people who do that, but I definitely don't answer Facebook quizzes. That's a really good thing. I'm glad you don't, but I would like to encourage everybody to use the kind of critical thinking and critical faculties that Danielle was just describing. So I've seen these in other flavours. The internet might pose to you a fun question. Do you remember the name of your first teacher? And people pile on answering, what's your favourite biscuit? I think I saw one of my family answer that the other week. For what it's worth, she really likes a fruit shortcake. But this is personal information that you are just giving away for free. And if you're giving anything away for free, other people will be potentially able to use that and use it against you. I thought that I'd follow Danielle's theme and just talk to you a bit about when phishing becomes really dangerous. So we've talked a little bit about what phishing is. We've talked how you might become susceptible, easy for me to say. And now let me just talk about why it could be a huge problem in business, because at the end of the day, we're all here to take back to our organisations snippets and gems of information in order to make us more internet secure. So here, the topic of the moment, can we talk about anything if we don't talk about coronavirus? This is the 5 signs of a coronavirus email phish. But actually what this talks you through here is the things that happen when we have email compromise and very critically business email compromise. So coronavirus emails became a major deal because coronavirus became a major deal. But what really happened is we all started doing things slightly differently. And a lot of companies, for example, started moving into markets that they'd never been in before. They started engaging in supply chains where they didn't have previous relationships. The sort of thing I'm thinking of is everybody started buying hand sanitizer. Everybody started buying face coverings. These are things that most companies, council officers and, the corner shop never purchased before. So they moved into these new markets and new spaces. That gave fraudsters an enormous amount of latitude to make solicitations to those people fraudulently, pretending to be something to do with this new supply chain that everybody was moving into. It was a fair bet to email an office about the sanitizer that they'd ordered, because do you know what? Everybody was. And the scammers here play on fear and they play on urgency. And this happens very frequently with business email compromise type scams. In the case of coronavirus, it's super simple because you can say, you know, we've suddenly got sanitizer in stock when it's been available. We've got face masks that we can sell that last week you couldn't get hold of. We have orders are coming in thick and fast. Your time is running out. What this is designed to do is take away one of the things that Danielle just told you that you had. She said you've got time. She said you don't have to like a post. You don't have to reply to a Facebook message. You don't have to share a post immediately. What these emails are trying to do is create an environment where you feel like you do have to respond immediately. It takes away your opportunity to engage your critical thinking. It will ask you for credentials or financial information. It will ask you to do that in an urgent way where you need to. And it may have some of the other things that Danielle's taught you about, like an unfamiliar greeting, a sketchy email address. It may make grammatical mistakes. But it's creating a sense of urgency in response that's entirely designed to remove the opportunity for you to do your critical thinking. Another flavour of this would be your Dear CEO type compromise, where people get an email unsolicited from a senior that says, you know, I'm stuck in an airport or a meeting and I need this invoice paying or some money transferring or this piece of data, their phone number perhaps, sent to my email address, but not my work email address, my private email address, because I'm in this unfortunate compromising situation. I need it right now. There's an urgent requirement. And before you know it, you've sent them the compromising piece of information or you've paid the invoice and you realise that this was a scam playing on that sense of urgency and your willingness to help. So I wanted to share with everybody this idea that that giving away data can happen when you are least anticipating that you're doing it. A photograph, a Facebook post, answering a Facebook quiz, answering a fun question. I wanted to share with you the idea that I think Danielle's idea of critical thinking is probably the single biggest myth taught in schools today. And I think that's a really good point that was made there in the introduction. And that the idea that you don't have to respond now, and if there is something within the solicitation that's pressuring you to respond now, that should be a red flag on its own, because it just removes your time to make that decision in a sound way. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. I'm sorry you couldn't see me, but I'm very happy to take some questions if people have them at the end of this session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy-Anne. I think I'm just going to get rid of all of my accounts of all sorts in case I've given away information that inadvertently I didn't realise I was giving away. That definitely is a wake-up call. There will be time, I hope, at the end for some questions. But in the meantime, Danielle King and Amy-Anne Fairhurst, thank you both very much indeed for talking us through fake news and cybersecurity. Now, let's move on to the next session, which is digital inclusion and poverty. 3 people taking part in this session: Andrew Rabbitt, who many of you will know, Ian Brewer, of course, who I think you will all know, and Deb Collett. So very briefly, let me introduce Andrew Rabbitt is CEO of Incuto, a financial technology company working in the credit union and ethical lending sector. Ian Brewer is Financial Inclusion Officer for Bradford District Credit Union and funded by Bradford Council. And Deb Collett works for Artworks Creative Communities, a participatory arts organisation based in Bradford. She's passionate about making art accessible to all because it is good for building communities and tackling poverty. I'm going to hand over to, and I think you're kicking off, are you, with Andrew?
We are. Thank you, Liz, and I hope you can all hear me okay. You'd be grateful to know, I hope that those of you who know me well, that I'm not going to be talking for very long on this. I'm delighted that Ian and Deb are on this because they've got far more interesting things to say than I have. I'll just kick this off with saying that from my perspective, we build technology for credit unions, and so we're really aware of some of the challenges that get built into that. And I think COVID has driven all of us to start doing things online, like shopping or talking to your GP or banking, that perhaps you haven't used before. And that for people who have used those kind of things before, you know the things to look out for. And actually, you know that there are certain sites that you wouldn't put your credit card details into, and there are certain places you wouldn't go to shop. And I think Danielle and Amy-Anne gave some amazing examples of that. And really the point around this is that as we move from to a group of more vulnerable people who may be digitally and financially excluded, and as we start to bring them into a more digital and financially included world, that can obviously create some dangers. And what I'm hoping we're going to talk about today is really what things can be done to start to address that. So Ian, maybe if I sort of start with you and maybe give everyone an intro, although we all know who you are. Just who are you, and how are you helping to tackle that, and how has Bradford coped with kind of starting to move people online? You're on mute, Ian.
There we go. Thank you for that, Andrew. It's really good to have everybody here. Thank you for joining us. And the most important thing is to know that credit unions are out there to be able to get people online, and many do online banking. One of the advantages that Bradford District Credit Union had is that we started early. 2015 is when we launched ours, which led to a lot of member growth at the time, and we issued our smartphone banking a couple of years later in 2018. The move to COVID, we obviously, like many people, there's a lot of people out there that didn't want to engage with us online, but because we had the infrastructure and the ability to do so, once COVID came along, everybody understood that. So the whole credit union movement is now responding and is offering online for that. So the opportunity there is when we did launch our internet banking, we recognized that there was a disconnect between financial inclusion and digital inclusion. And there was a lot of people that didn't have that ability to do so. Now, over the last 5 years, we've held one of these conferences every year as a way to talk about our internet banking and a way to talk about keeping people safe. 5 years on, a lot more people are becoming more digitally engaged. But the issue is that as people do becoming digitally engaged, we're finding that they gravitate towards the things that are dangerous, the online gambling, the scams that we talked about earlier, and other such things there that actually try to drag money and take money away from people that can ill afford to lose it. So there's a lot of things out there that we can do for that. And one of the ways that we've connected is with Deb in Artworks. And I'm going to hand over to Deb because she's come up with a really good way of being able to help people do that over the last 12 months in COVID. Tell us more about that, Deb.
Oh, you're on mute, Deb.
You're on mute, Deb.
We're going to play this game all the way around.
Yeah. Can I be heard now?
Yeah,
I've been sending messages for a while to say please unmute me, and at last I am on.
There we go.
So yeah, we were acutely aware that people were, excluded in so many ways, and in this pandemic, with increasing poverty and isolation, that we really wanted to find ways to sort of reach out to people. And what we did was start creating bundles of creativity that were distributed via food banks and via mechanisms that when people are receiving them went some way to offer them opportunities for sort of self-education, self-empowerment, enjoyment, revitalisation of their humanity, if you like. And then alongside that, we wanted to provide easily accessible and trusted information that would be of use. And that varied in all sorts of ways. So some of it was financial information. I mean, we sort of started off with, you know, with the District Credit Union producing, where is it? Like a really useful leaflet. You know, highly visual.
Let's talk money, that was.
Let's talk money, which just sort of highlighted some of the things that would be of concern, and that went down very well. We've looked at ways of sort of engaging with people in a really sort of holistic way. So no finger wagging or, you know, telling people they ought to do this or that. You know, times are hard enough, aren't they? So we sort of developed affirmations. So our first affirmation was that in the very first edition, and that was a colour it in yourself. But significantly, on the back was all the information that you needed if you were seeking to, you know, end being in a domestically violent and abusive situation. And that makes so much more sense than saying, oh, here's a link, you know, this is something that you can have to hand, this is something you can have on your wall, and something that's really useful. And what we did was we built up a set of relationships. So we've been able to work with other members of APEG to send out information about signs to look out for child sexual exploitation and abuse. So we were able to send a leaflet out about that. And just to, and what we found is that by including things all together, which at first glance appears to be something for the children to keep them occupied while they're at home, and particularly focused on the families that didn't have the access to the gear, because although, you know, people may have access to the internet maybe through one phone in the house, they're not got enough laptops for the kids to do the schoolwork, you know. So something that was fed back to us that was really helpful was from a school that we work with, saying when we sent out the Halloween, which was all Loan Sharks and Monsters edition, which I can give you a quick, Loan Sharks and Monsters. Sorry, I'm going back to front, aren't I? And we work with an artist, which we've been doing consistently over the editions, just to sort of make something interesting, visual, not too word heavy, but just really focusing on key issues. And it was reported that the child explained to their grandma that there was information in the Halloween pack about loan sharks, and it was in the children's pack so that parents wouldn't feel silly about it when they needed to know about it. So when they got the next pack, which was the midwinter pack, the child then said, is there anything you want in it before I start cutting it up and colouring in? So, you know, we sort of, there was then that sort of sense of understanding and expectation that this pack, which, you know, looks like jolly good fun and is, you know, it's got lots of the sorts of things that you might expect, you know, might also have, you know, this centre spread is about young people and mental health and things that they can do themselves to try and keep well, but is anything, you know, not like a general leaflet. So I think by combining a a sense of creativity, which does speak. It speaks to people's humanity. And I think that when you do that, that is a very, very good stepping stone to encouraging and recognising that they do have critical faculties.
Yeah.
And that they are able to use those critical faculties and that knowledge of the world to apply that knowledge to, you know, recognise a scam when it's seen, perhaps to recognise that there's extra distress in the house, perhaps to recognise that maybe a child's spending a bit too much time on the gaming and has been lured in by loot boxes, and maybe I should think about what can I do about this. And we're backing up this engagement with some useful information to support that people being able to take control of their lives at a time when, you know, for all of us, it is very, very difficult to feel that you're actually in control of your life.
Thanks for that, Debs. Absolutely. And, you know, yeah, Andrew.
You know, I was just going to say, look, it's absolutely fascinating. And when we first met and looked at this stuff, the obvious question was, why are you printing it out? And when we first talked, there was a word that kind of came up through this that was about trust and information. And you know, the previous session kind of highlighted it. And I remember when we first talked about children's mental health, just for the benefit of the audience, just for a laugh in the background, I typed in children's mental health into Google. Other search engines are available, I believe. But in less than a second, it had found 1.2 billion results. And so that kind of trusted source of information. And you mentioned that you distribute these via the food bank, and obviously they're coming up via the credit union as well. Do you think that ability to distribute, well, actually, a big question is, how have you got these things out of the door? Right, we're in a lockdown. Presumably, you didn't get on your bicycle and go deliver them. That's
the magic of Deb.
Well, I mean, to be honest, yes, I do one session in the car park of Cliff Castle in Keighley. That's known as the Keighley drop. So about 2,000 go out then, but just we do it by timing. So we get everything together, and then I'm very, very strict. So people come in 15-minute slots to our base, Delius Arts and Cultural Centre, you know, and people appreciate that. So it's just in and out, and then they distribute. And a lot of them are, you know, some of them are quite big outfits. Some people are taking, you know, some groups are taking 500. Some people are taking 20 or 30. So it does vary, and it's right across the district. Hence the Keighley drop, because it's a bit much, isn't it?
I would love to be able to talk more on this, because obviously we're going to get shortened now because we're on a webinar. But the census is coming up. We're doing a special census edition. 1 minute on the census edition. Why are we doing it?
Okay. Well, we're doing it's our numbers edition. So we've got a feature on the census. And I've been working closely with the engagement manager to try and come up with something that kind of breaks down, because they've got some fantastic publications. I have to really take my hat off to them. But there is about 25 pages of stuff, and we want a double page spread that will address some of people's concerns, will sort of chivvy up their sense of social justice and taking part in society because of what the purpose of the census is. We'll give them all the information that they need if they've got any difficulties with access, and reassurances about what the process actually is with a word search. We've also got a feature on other things, Citizen Coin. Pete's we're the warm-up, aren't we, for Pete? Yeah, he's on in a minute. And then we're also looking at things from the Science and Media Museum. Everything is numbers focused. So what we've tried to do is make the entire edition about numbers being useful.
Yes,
how else do we organise
there as well?
So yeah.
As a closing thought, then, because we are going to get shouted at if we go too far over time. Deb, it sounds amazing, and there's like a lot of people on the call today listening into this. If they wanted to support their service users, get involved, get in touch? Can they just come to you and start to use some of these resources? Is that something that?
Yes, by all means. I mean, if you are in direct contact with people and you can distribute some, by all means. What I will also do is I'll try and put up in the chat the link to the issue, because we've posted all of them on issue. So if you wanted to extrapolate any of the resources, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you
Brilliant.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for that. It's really interesting. We'll hand back to Liz.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. As if I would dare to shout at you, Andrew. I know my place. Deb, that's absolutely terrific. And we will be putting, if you put the link on the chat, then for people who don't manage to pick it up, we will distribute links as well as slides, because people have so far said that they are willing to share their slides. So thank you very, very much indeed for that.
We'll do that.
And I am going to move on in the interest of time to the aforementioned Pete. And the aforementioned Pete is Peter Kemp. And this is the first of 3 case studies that Peter is going to give us. Peter Kemp is Managing Director at Citizen Coin and leads the work on social value recognition and technology development. So I'm going to hand straight over to Peter. Thank you very much indeed, Peter, for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be working with Jackie, my right-hand woman, who will be doing the slides for me. You can't see me because for some reason my tech won't allow video. That isn't necessarily a bad thing if you've all just had lunch, so I think we've all won on that one. So anyway, straight into it. Citizen Coin Bradford, what is it? Citizen Coin Bradford is a platform and a social token which rewards people for the great stuff that they do every day for which they don't get rewarded. So that may be volunteering, it may be for participation, it may be for training, it may be for education, it may be for their health journey. So it's a platform. If you wouldn't mind rolling onto the next screen, Jackie. That's good. So yeah, where we are, we've got Citizen Coin Bradford. Bradford is running the 3rd version of the platform. We had 2 trial platforms, one in Hull, which started 5 years ago and ran for a couple of years, which was sponsored by Comic Relief and by the lottery. And we ran that project in Hull for a few years as a test and learn model. And the idea we had, we were working with the anti-poverty unit at Hull City Council. We're a separate organisation. We were looking at a model which meant to use technology in order to engage a wider range of the public. As funding was being cut to local authorities left, right and centre, we want to maximise our bang for our buck. So we're a bit of an unusual company, really, because we have technologists. I've personally been involved in what we call public engagement technologies and the development of probably since 2000. We have people who are marketeers, we have local authority staff, ex-local authority staff, we have people from the VCS, we have marketeers, we have designers. Between us, we have a bit of a social engineering thing came on. Hullcoin was the first iteration, which happened 5 years ago, as I say. And when we first proposed this, it hit the national press, in fact, the international press, and we ended up attracting some quite lead economic fingers. So the New Economics Foundation wanted to know more about what we're doing and ran a series of sessions with us. The Nesta, similarly, and the team that helped to develop the Euro for Europe under Bernard Litter, we're involved with those guys too also. You're really onto something here. And what we're looking at is a mechanism, as I said before, to reward people for doing the great stuff that they do. So the 3rd iteration of this, we first met with Bradford City Council a couple of years ago, and we planned and plotted and got it through various departments, and we soft launched the Citizen Coin Bradford in December. And when I say soft launch, we did a tiny bit of press release, a tiny bit of PR, and and because we wanted to see what the technology and what the feedback was like and the model was like out in the public. So how does it work? So if you go to Here we go. It's just like the COVID presentation. Yeah, next slide, Jackie. Thank you. So who is it relevant to? How does it work? So the three main tenants. So we have the general public who do great stuff all the time and volunteer. And Bradford District in particular has got a really strong history of phenomenal voluntary activity. I know there's a call out when the first wave of COVID hit for volunteers to help out with deliveries and calling lonely people and a whole range of stuff. And within 48 hours, I think Bradford had a response of over 4,000 people, which is stunning, really. But there's always been lots of voluntary work and community work going right across the Bradford district. So that's one portion. The other part which the mechanism works with are the agencies that do good stuff. So all your voluntary and charities sector, your local authority, your colleges, your training groups, your education groups, and your health groups, particularly through social prescribing. So that's two of the three parts. And then the final part would be the retail. So what we do is here we have, when people are rewarded with these digital tokens in the form of citizen coins, which there are two platforms, one is a mobile phone, one is a website, they can then use those citizen coin to access discounts from retailers across the district, across the whole district. That's the principle. So retailers advertise through the platform, a bit like Groupon, I suppose, and say, look, for one of your coins, we are willing to give you X discount off this particular service, and we will of this particular service or product, and as a reward for all the great stuff that you've done. And so there's a really nice kind of social feeling about this. Originally, it was all about anti-poverty when we very first started modelling it, and we realised that this was a wider, more inclusive social offer than this, that basically includes everyone in the UK. So the kind of context we've got here could be people in a voluntary sort of way, working in environmental, working within sports context, so people like helping out with sports clubs, football clubs, rugby clubs, swimming clubs, hockey clubs, whatever they may be. It could be people who are training and skilling up as mechanics, engineers. It could be people who offer entertainment, music services for free. So there's a chance of them being rewarded for going out there and entertaining the public. All these things have a social value context. Social value is, in its very definition, is very broad and very wide. And what we found as a part of our modelling was that it's really hard for local authorities or for charities or for other groups to actually really nail the social value that's been conducted in their name with their various projects. So this system has a great reporting mechanism. So for the local authority or for the charity which licenses this product, they have a record of all the transactional history of all the people they've rewarded for all the activities that have been executed on all the dates and all the times. So they have a record of all the great stuff that's gone on under their name, which helps with proving outputs for current funding programs they're on, and also in applying for new funding streams for their own sustainability. Then the individual ends up with a social CV. So every time they are rewarded by these organisations that are doing great stuff, they end up with a record of the fact that they were rewarded for helping clean somebody's garden, helping give someone a lift, helping on a call to people who are lonely, whatever that may be. So the individual ends up with a social CV, which works very well. No, you can actually flip to the next one. We're working on telepathy. That's really good, Jackie. I like that. So there are many contexts in which this can work, as I say. And the idea is that everyone has a trackable record. So the local authority can see what's going on across its district. Each of the organisations that are doing the good stuff, the voluntary organisations and the training organisations, they themselves can see all the activity with all their participants. They also can promote and advertise all this through the website and through the mobile phone app. And it's from that point of view, it's quite revolutionary. What we're aiming to do in Bradford, although we only soft launch, we've already onboarded 18 charities and training organisations and voluntary organisations who currently represent 6,000 people. Now, we've managed to do that since the beginning of December to date, and that's with Christmas in the middle and a level 4 lockdown. We've actually managed to secure 10 retailers at this stage as well, which may not sound very many, but in the current situation, that's bad. Our aim is to have 200 on by the end of summer, and we're looking at about 10,000 to 15,000 individuals using this particular platform within the Bradford District by autumn. Digital inclusion, obviously, what's relevant about digital inclusion with this particular thing? We ran an exercise with the Department of Work and Pensions, which was sanctioned from Central Office in Government, in the whole pilot that we ran, which will work perfectly well in Bradford too. And we worked with the Department of Work and Pensions coaches who were looking to train people to improve their digital inclusion, from people who were complete novice to people who had a very basic grounding. And what they were looking to do in this instance was to set up an email, help them set up an email account and understand what an email account was, get them to apply through the Citizen Coin website to become a member. So that was another part of their engagement, for which they're rewarded in the form of coins, Citizen Coins. They could then expunge those coins at retailers. So if they had a smartphone, they were taught how that would work. How it works in a retail context is via QR code scanning. So within the app, there's from your camera, there's a QR code. You walk in, as long as you've got coins within your wallet, within your app, you scan the offer that's created by the retailer and you jump straight through the queue. It happens within seconds. So I suppose what is important when you come to digital inclusion is there are a lot of people out there already who actually don't have a smartphone and maybe don't readily have access to a computer too. So what we have in that scenario is they work with the agencies that do the great stuff, the voluntary and charity and education and health organisations, and those guys would help them set up an account, a digital account. With each individual that signs up, they end up with a QR code, a unique QR code, which is then printed out, and when they want to do a retail transaction, they go to the retailer, show their QR code on the print, the retailer scans their QR code, and the transaction process works that way. So that was our way of including those who currently find it difficult from a digital perspective. Could you do the next slide, please? So as you see here, I think this is kind of a model of the various stakeholders that we've worked with. And the aim behind it. So top left there, we wanted a communication device that would save a lot of manpower or woman power or person power. Pardon me, I was born in the 60s, so I'm not always PC. So a lot of person power. And to facilitate a mechanism that cut out expend, I suppose. So it made it effective and efficient to run. The next part along there in the orange flow chart is about finance. So you've got things like the credit union. So this can tie well in with that. It can make people's money go further if they're obtaining discounts across a whole range of services and products. And I'll give you a for instance in that. From empirical evidence, from what we've learned over the last 5 years, we've had discount offers of £1 off a cup of coffee, £30 discount, which is 50% off a haircut, a hair treatment. We've had legal fees, 20% off initial legal fees. We've had discounts off driving lessons. We've had discounts off cafes. We've had discounts off restaurants. We've had discounts off, so say computer repair. I suppose a standout one would be discount off a broadband connection service. So for one token, for one Citizen Coin, an individual got 99% off their installation charge, which to that individual was worth £99. So we have a way here of making people's money go further. So as an anti-poverty measure, that was really quite cute. What's really important within the mechanism too is that there's the ability to send your coins on to other people. One of the arguments from the research and the trials that we did where people would say, well, I don't need to join this thing. I don't want a reward. I do this anyway. This is what I like to do. And the explanation to those people, by them participating in it and receiving these rewards, that provides a trackable element for the organisation they're doing the great stuff for. And if they want to, they can send their tokens onto other people within the network. And an instance for that was we had one of the participants whose niece was just about to go was looking for driving lessons. So he sent her 10 of his tokens. She was on the platform, 10 of the tokens. She joined in a driving school and got a range of discount over the first 6 lessons that given. So if we move along to the next orange character, which is top right, which is health. So you look at people's health journeys. So if people are helping to, say, for example, quit smoking, or if they're helping or losing weight, or becoming more socially engaged and getting away from their computers, when we're finally allowed to do this after lockdown, they can be rewarded for that behaviour too. And you could then maybe have health-based retail on the platform itself, which would steer the person towards that. So to healthy eating, maybe to vitamins, maybe to going to a gym, maybe to engaging that way. The job centre I already described, we did train work coaches. We've used it in school contexts where teachers reward pupils, not necessarily for being high attainers, but for maybe just doing that a little bit more, for turning up more regularly for class, for handing homeworks in more regularly, for just really starting to engage, maybe for volunteering within the school too. So could you do next slide, please? Okay, as I say, we have two ways the public can directly engage. One is through the mobile phone app, which is where the majority of the public would go, and the other one is through the website. I've just realised, Jackie, you didn't play that video, did you? That's okay. It doesn't need to be done now. We're fine. So the video just explained the journey of a volunteer. And then we might actually, let's pop that in at the end if you don't mind. So the website is one way, and as you can see here, third box along, the grey box with the people carrying something. That's how an organisation would manage its activities, schedule them, say how many people it wanted to join, what the reward would be in the form of Citizen Coin, Bradford Citizen Coin, what they would be rewarded, and everyone ends up with a record of that. That goes into the volunteer's wallet, for example, and from there, the volunteer can spend those at retailers across the district. So yeah, that's if anyone would like to have a look, and I would love everyone to have a look who's in the Bradford District. You can have a look even if you're not, to be honest. But if you go to bradford.citizencoin.uk, there'll be more of an explanation there, and sign up. It's a really exciting project. We are aiming, by the way, once we get to 10,000, I think we will be the largest social currency in Europe. We also have work going on in other districts. We're also about to join on. Could you move to the next slide, please? Jackie? Hello?
Sorry, Peter. It may be that we've lost Jackie.
Okay.
Technology being what it is, I'm not sure that she's with us.
She's been so good as well. Well, look, I can. There's just two other areas I wanted to discuss, which is about the wider rollout of this. The aim of this is for the whole of the UK to have this within the next 5 years. That's what our aim is. We have access to 170 local authorities already. Where looks like we're in conversations with Microsoft to help us into those places, and the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation. We have Leeds, who set a budget aside, who also want to come on board. We have Hull City Council, which is looking, Sunderland, and Wakefield local authority, which are looking at this too. And our aim is to have it initially right along the M62. We're in conversations with Bristol too. And the coins and tokens will be interoperable and trackable, so you'll be able to use what you've earned in all kinds of different locations. So just that part, it's very, do you know, isn't it amazing how you do? So what's our next stage? What we're doing in Bradford is we are scaling it. The initial part of the pilot is finished, and we are building up for full scale. Obviously, during a level 4 lockdown, we can't do the kind of social cohesion side of it and have the retail open. So what we're looking at is from lockdown to lift off. So we're looking at Bradford MDC lift off is our proposal. And over the next couple of months, with all the relevant stakeholders, including sports and leisure from Bradford District Council. So we have We will have sports centres on there. We'll have theatres on there. We will have gymnasiums on there. We will have a whole range of sporting things on there. We'll have arts and theatre, all offering discount at the gate, if you like. So that's our next part of rollout. And we're looking at running press and PR campaigns. It's a really good news story. Everybody wins. The retailer wins because it helps them connect with their local population. The individual wins because they're rewarded for the great stuff that they're doing. Organisations win because they can prove and evidence and promote and advertise the great stuff that they're doing. So it's kind of a triple win all round. Oh, you're back on it again. That's fantastic. So that's what that graphic there explains. We're using state-of-the-art technology. Everyone says that, but we are. Data security is absolutely paramount. So every individual's data is anonymised. We only have group and batch data that becomes viewable by the local authority. We are using a platform which can scale up to 100 million people within a couple of months, and we're very serious about growing this thing. So thank you everyone for listening. We're really excited. Keep an eye out what's happening in Bradford, and so far it's a great success story. Thanks very much for letting us know.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. I know you had a little video that you wanted to play, but I think what Jackie is saying is that she will share the video with the attendees, if that's okay with you. So
that's lovely.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. So let's move on to the second case study, inclusive digital transformation of health and care. Ros Davies is going to talk us through this. She is Managing Director for Habitat, a co-designed digital inclusion and innovation collective hosted by Leeds and York Partnership NHS. Habitat are working with health and care systems to co-design inclusion into digital transformation. Ros, it's very good to have you here. Over to you.
Hi, I'm just sorting out my screen. There'll be a second.
Yeah. I think Ros had dropped out, so we're just reconnecting everything.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Brilliant. So, hello, that's me.
Hi, that's you.
Jackie, have you got my presentation? Can you see just me?
Sorry?
Yes,
we
can see you.
I'm not.
Yeah, can you share your screen and put your slides up, or do you want me to put the slides up?
Let me see. Actually, can you do it, and then I won't mess about any longer, because I realised that we're running short on time. Sort of look at the clock.
No problem.
Thank you, Jackie. Then you can make me go quicker.
Carry on and I'll put you want to carry on and I'll put the slides up.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much for inviting me along today. I have really enjoyed and learned a lot of, from all the other speakers, and I think we need more Deb Colletts in the world, actually. I've fallen in love with her. And what I've sort of noticed so far is I think there's sort of 4 things that have come out, which I hope will also connect with what I'm about to talk with. And the first one is clearly community is the answer. The second thing is the importance of critical thinking. Third thing is around change. I think we're all looking at social change towards social justice. And then the other thing I think that's really come out is around caring and compassion. And that's basically where we're coming from at Habitat. And I'm going to give you a bit of a sort of health and care perspective, but also kind of system level perspective. So as has already been mentioned, we're hosted by Leeds and York Partnership Foundation Trust. And it's important to say that because we are a team that's absolutely committed to the values and principles of the NHS. And I've sort of highlighted the first principle on the screen, a comprehensive service available to all. And what we're concerned about is, as we go through digital transformation, it's important to hold on to that principle, a digitally enabled comprehensive service available to all. And I think our starting point is, and I think, you know, COVID has really shone a light on this, that the level of inequalities that we have in this country is unacceptable. And it's currently, we think, being compounded by digital transformation. So I'm going to talk about why health and care should be at the table, and working with other partners to tackle digital exclusion. And why it's important to recognise the root cause issue here is the inequality of power, of opportunity and income. I'm going to share with you a little bit about our social change programme, Inclusive Digital Transformation. So next slide, please. Thank you. So it will be a bit of an understatement really to say that COVID-19 has acted as a catalyst for the digital transformation of health and care. So from the way that we run our meetings on Microsoft Teams instead of face-to-face, to the way that we deliver services remotely, so virtual wards, remote video consultations, booking a COVID-19 tests, oximeters, etc. These are just like a few of the examples of the digital tools that we're now using at scale. And the potential digital to help us deliver high quality and effective health services, and to help create the conditions where people feel empowered with a wide range of choice of information and services and tools is really incredible. I myself live with type 1 diabetes, and it's really changed my life and the way that I manage my condition. So from online information to getting peer support on WhatsApp, to managing my blood sugar level and swiping with my phone using on a track sensor. These have all been a lifesaver to me, but of course there is a flaw in the plan. Next slide, please. And that is that there's 9 million people who aren't able to access the internet and their devices by themselves. 4% of households don't have access to the internet, and these people are more likely to be older, living in poverty, living with disabilities, on low incomes and so on. And there's evidence suggests that actually those people are more likely to need health and care services. So that's the flaw in the plan. Next slide, please. So drilling down into why people are unable to access digitally enabled health and care, our research and experience has shown us that there's 3 main domains which all have an impact. The first is about real life factors, so the social and wider determinants of health, such as social capital, employment, education, level of income, housing, etc. So these all have a significant impact. And imagine if you're living, if you're homeless or living with domestic abuse, it's actually going to be really complicated to use digitally enabled health and care. The second factors are the ones that are most talked about, I think, in digital exclusion. So digital skills and confidence and motivation, and actually access to digital and data in the first place. And the third leg of the stool, which is often missed, is the design and accessibility of tools, the system side of things, and staff capacity and capability. So I think, and what I've also written here is about the root cause of all of this. So, you know, when you get dig deep, the root cause again is the inequality of power, opportunity and income. So what we've got here is a really complicated, wicked system problem, and it's messy, and there are interconnected factors, and it's not easy to solve. There's no one silver bullet or one single route to solving this issue, but there's a lot we can do and we should do to improve this situation. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, we set up a social change programme last year, and we've called it Inclusive Digital Transformation, and it's about exploring the ways that we can support health and care systems to really purposefully design in inclusion into digitally enabled health and care, so that it works for everybody. And the idea is that we work in partnership with people who might be more excluded, and we also work as far upstream as possible. And we want to make sure that nobody is left behind or excluded due to this digital transformation. But that doesn't mean to say that we support digital by default. We need to remember that digital is not the goal. It should always be an enabler and never a blocker. The next slide, please. So we've been doing this for about 6 months now. We've been working with, well, anybody who shares our values and mission, I guess a coalition of the willing. And this has included the NHS, local government, voluntary sector, universities. And here's some of our emerging findings. There's a deliberate wiggly line in the middle because that's supposed to explain that this is a twisted and long and bendy journey, and sometimes we go around in circles and so on. You know, we don't have all the answers. But there's some really clear things that are starting to come out, and I think they'll kind of make sense to a lot of people, and certainly the people I've been listening to so far on here. The importance of starting by mapping the needs and assets in the area to understand the nuances and the context, and to make the most of local resources, create synergy and avoid duplication. And there won't be anywhere where there's a blank page, and you'll unearth real treasures like the work of Digital Access West Yorkshire and 100% digital leads and so on. And also the financial inclusion work that Ian.brewer is doing here in Bradford. And then the second part is about starting with what matters to the people in your local system, and starting where the energy is, where the priorities are, and growing from there. And once you understand the needs and priorities, finding out who the touch points, and I think, and this was mentioned in the last presentation, the touch points, the people who have relationships of trust with the communities that you want to engage and work with and support. And I think it's really important to say here that no one partner, organisation or sector has all the answers or all the resources to tackle this issue. For example, local government understands the wider determinants of health. The voluntary sector are often rooted in specific communities, which means they're often the touch points. And the NHS has resources like access to Wi-Fi and clinical expertise. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to focus in on one specific project that we've been working on across West Yorkshire and Harrogate, because it relates to most closely to what we're talking about today. And it is digital and data poverty. This is a huge barrier for people in accessing digitally enabled health and care and other services right now. And I think we've seen that during lockdown, and in particular the move to online schooling, which has really shone a spotlight on these issues. I think there's been an incredible community and public response to this issue. And I mentioned Digital Access West Yorkshire, who was set up by a group of talented and resourceful and really caring citizens who felt compelled to act. And it actually turns out that they aren't alone. There's similar groups mobilising up and down the country. And I think this power of community, and I think we saw it in what Deb Collett was saying, is not to be underestimated. And to me, it's one of the hopeful silver linings in quite a dark time. And there's also quite a lot of big national organisations like Good Things Foundation and Future.net who are campaigning to get people the devices and connectivity and support that they need. And there's some really lovely specialist organisations like the Inspiring Solidaritech who have been working with specific communities on this issue for a number of years now. And actually the media have now got involved, with everyone from the One Show to, and this is the first time I've ever mentioned this organisation in a presentation of mine, but to the Daily Mail. Highlighting that, and they've been highlighting the lack of access to devices for school-aged children who live in poverty. So in the last few months, we've been working with the West Yorkshire and Harrogate health and care system to really explore how can we design inclusion into digital transformation. We started by taking a strength-based approach and focusing on that thing that I talked about, where the energy lies and where the assets are. And we discovered that we have many of those ingredients for tackling digital and data poverty at a systemic level in this area. So I mentioned Digital Access West Yorkshire, Solidaritech, North York's Council, Kirklees Council, who I think are coming next, Leeds Asylum Seekers Network, and the work here in Bradford on financial inclusion. All of these different parts all have a contribution to make to tackling digital and data poverty. So we ran a co-design workshop recently, and we brought together these experts I've just mentioned with phone companies, chief information officers in the NHS and other stakeholders. And the idea was to design a blueprint for the different routes of, first of all, getting hold of devices, how we get them in the right condition for distribution, and then how do we get them into the hands of people who need them. And this is a bit of a blueprint for the first stage blueprint of what we've come up with. Our next step is to really prototype getting a device out of one of those big anchor institutions like an NHS trust through this process, and then to engage the whole system in helping to work together to achieve the common aim of making the most of our resources and trying to tackle and overcome device and data poverty. And we hope this will be quite a useful asset for health and care systems across the country. Next slide, please, and my last slide. So this is one of my favourite Banksy pictures. It says, "Keep your coins, I want change." And I'm really glad that communities and local healthcare systems are mobilising and making the most of the assets, kindness and resources that they have together, because I think this is how social change happens. It's part of changing the public discourse and engaging the mainstream. And we know that if that happens, politicians are more likely to make change and make the change that we need. So fundamentally, I think it's important to say that digital and data poverty is caused by the inequality of power, opportunity and income. And there are many interconnected symptoms that others campaign for. So, for example, gambling or food poverty or the climate crisis. And the pandemic has absolutely exacerbated existing inequalities and caused disproportionate pain and loss to more disadvantaged communities, which is totally unacceptable. But as we've seen by Black Lives Matters, food poverty and now digital poverty campaigns, the general public are getting on board. So I wonder if now is the time to join all the dots and become more bold and brave and strategic together in really tackling this root cause issue. I can't help thinking that a society which gets it right for the most vulnerable and disadvantaged gets it right for everybody. Thank you. I hope I did that quick enough to catch up on time.
Absolutely brilliant, Ros. But the joining up the dots point is just fundamentally important. And to that end, I'm going to contact you after this and ask you to come along and do that presentation again. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely tremendous. And so let's move on to our final case study, Kirklees Digital Inclusion. And Mark Hollingsdale is with us. Mark is the operational manager within Kirklees Council IT Service. Its main responsibility centres around managing IT change within the organisation and ensuring the strategic direction of IT platforms meet the needs of all services and residents. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Liz. You can hear me, can't you? Just before
yes.
I'm not muted or anything. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the invite today. It's been very interesting to listen to everybody, and you know, I think coming from an IT section, it really helps. This is the kind of thing that we really want to understand, because we learn a lot from the partners that we work with. But I will now, because I know we're short on time, I will now go into to talk to you a little bit about what we've done in Kirklees over the last 12 to 14 months. So specifically, and what we were asked to talk about today is to talk about what we've done in terms of digital inclusion, but how we've increased access to equipment for residents, etc., as part of our strategy. And so the first slide that we've put up, so thanks, Jackie, is this is one slide from our technology strategy, and we're being a traditional IT service. You know, we are there to deliver an IT service and keep the lights on, so to speak, and deliver applications. But what we aspire to do is to add, bring some more value to what we do, because obviously we've got a lot of knowledge and experience around technology, etc. So when we wrote this iteration of our strategy, we wanted to demonstrate where, how we feel we can add some more value. And a big theme of that, which I've taken the lead on, is around inclusivity. So, about digital inclusion, to be precise. And the launch of our technology strategy, and particularly pre-COVID, we were very much focusing on the skills aspect. So making sure that we could, talk about some of the, whether there's applications, Office 365, that we could develop skills for people and give people opportunities to learn, because that gives them a dip into learning and then to start to understand. But when we knew there was a gap in the ability for residents to connect, and whether it was through a lack of device or whether they got connectivity in the property. And another sort of catalyst for why we got more involved was that we were already working in partnerships with like fibre providers to ensure Kirklees becomes a better connected place. But when you think about that, people might get connected, but then what we didn't know was the scale of the real exclusion, or the factors that lay beneath why a person or a group of people might be excluded, whether that's affordability, skills, understanding needs, etc. So whilst we knew these kind of things that would emerge pre-pandemic, we were thinking, well, we have got something to sort of hang our hat on here, that we could actually be involved in skills, and we could start looking at partnerships to promote ourselves as an organisation that could try and help develop skills. But with the advent of the pandemic, it became more about tactical responses. So if we could just go on to the next slide. So if we talk about some of the tactical response that we had, so this is a very busy slide. It's an excellent slide that one of my colleagues did. So some of my slides are not quite as exciting as this, but this is really about the impact that some of the tactical things that we did, Kerklees did in partnership with lots of other people. It wasn't just us; we were just involved a little bit. But these are the kind of things that happened within Kirklees, and I'm sure they happened in lots of other authorities as well. But as a demonstration, what we started to learn here was the things that the tactical response was about the impact and the benefits. So the positive impacts that being connected can have. So here this is particularly around social isolation and the opportunities that being connected provide and the impact that they can have. So whilst the slide is there and this is sort of real feedback from real people and people who witnessed the impact, to list some of the things that we did. So within care homes, we were able to get 60 plus Facebook portal devices out there, which helped residents that probably wouldn't have had access to that kind of thing to stay in touch with their loved ones and reduce their social isolation during lockdown. Deploy devices, support medical assessments linked with GPs and doctors. There were tablets deployed in Kirklees care homes, which offered, video conference capabilities to family, etc. There was work done with adults with learning needs in daycare, dementia, and disability living. Again, Facebook portals and tablets, given out to residents to help with, their own social isolation. And then we're also involved in bids for Tech Force 19 bid, which was used to develop an app for Age UK. And then another part that we did, we got some really good links with the local voluntary community groups, and whilst again we were looking at it from an advisory point of view, we were able to provide them with a range of laptops, phones, tablets that they then use themselves for local known needs, etc. But I think the takeaway on this particular slide is about the impact. So I suppose when we got to this stage, we were starting to understand that, even though these are tactical responses and we're looking at devices, etc., there is a positive outcome and an impact for different people. And I think that starts to build on our learning. So if we could just move to the next slide, which is, like I say, is not quite as busy and quite as informed, but I think this is an example of where we are at the moment. So over the time of all those tactical responses, I suppose in the curve that the pandemic has been, that we got into the summer and things started to relent a little bit and people were getting a little bit back to normal, but we were still building on some of the knowledge that we'd gained, and we were looking to work with other partners within Kirklees, and so to look at where other groups of people other than adults, etc., that we could actually deliver something to. So first one there is ESOL. Well, that's English as a second language. So an example there is that 28 residents within that group have received devices and connectivity to help them adapt to life in the UK. Works Better scheme is a scheme that we've just managed to get out this week, actually. So this is targeted at longer term unemployed residents who will be issued with connectivity if they need it, if they've not got connectivity at home, but they're also issued with a device which will help them to look for jobs, etc. The foster carers, we work closely with the foster caring people in Kirklees to make sure that all those children had devices outside of the offer from the DFE. And of course, the DFE offer was excellent, and we've been able to supplement that through a range of sort of partnerships and looking at different bits of funding that we've managed to get together. So we think there's a 5,000 plus devices out within Kirklees that I think we should, with the other bits and pieces that we can bring together, we're hoping that it'll be up to around 8,000 devices that go out to sort of vulnerable children or children who otherwise wouldn't have had a device to connect to. So something I've not referenced on this slide, but is another little project that we've been doing along with our colleagues in economy, and that's around some sort of community hubs in the Dewsbury area, North Kirklees area. So there are 4 sites there, and we've worked in collaboration with those colleagues in economy. We're in the process of equipping the 4 community buildings with improved broadband connections, a review of their internal IT infrastructure, so cabling, Wi-Fi access points, things like that, and the devices that they'll get. So the effect being that the centres will become a local hub for residents to get into a building, get online, and explore the internet, and hopefully learn new skills. And obviously, in the times of lockdown, we intend that all these loan devices that we're going to provide will sort of be loaned out directly to residents. And again, just to build on that, some of these projects are rolling out, and whilst we were sort of doing this, and we're still doing it up to autumn and carrying on now, I think at the same time we've gone back to where we were right at the start in terms of strategy. So we now look, we've started to think about what have we learned here and what do we go back to in the strategy. So we have started to think about. It comes back to skills and things like that, which I think is the link to what we're talking about today. Is that yes, it's great to get devices out there, but we don't need to put a health warning on them, but we just need to have some kind of education around there. So and in terms of that, and also in terms of the solutions that we provide in these cases, in these projects, they've all been designed to meet specific needs and create positive outcomes. But for each individual that receives a device or gets to loan a device, the intention is for access to the internet to go beyond the primary specific objective of the programme, allow all those users to experience the positive things that being connected to the internet has to offer. So for a number of the projects, then I suppose, again, linking this to today, what we've done in Kerkley is we've identified a sustainable model that guarantees sort of an appropriate level of safety and anonymity for the user, and allows us the devices that we're issuing on a loan basis or a temporary basis, that so those devices can be easily passed between users without compromising their personal data. Now, there's different ways of doing that. We've got one specific device, but we're not, we are device agnostic. It's just that's what we've been able to develop. So can we just go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So whilst we, again, jumping around a little bit here, so whilst we've done those tactical things, and we're trying to link it back to strategic stuff, so going back to some of the strategic things that we're still continuing with. So the Kerkley Digital Inclusion Partnership is something that we've worked with colleagues in policy, in the policy team, to bring together members of internal colleagues from education, economy, children's, adults, and also partners from the voluntary sector, the university and the college, and local health providers, to share insight into all the work that we're all doing and identify where we can all combine our abilities and experiences. And in fact, as in one or two of those projects I've just mentioned, even budgets and grants that we've actually been able to provide devices with. But all in all, it's to identify and tackle the digital inclusion that we know about, but also to start to understand the broader challenges that providing a sustainable set of solutions is going to bring. And I think the first of those is having an adequate, sustainable supply of devices, which is something that Ross was just describing. So we're looking at, we know we can't fund this from new devices, but we can look at things about recycling, the methods that we can get those devices wiped, how we can get a sustainable supply of those, how we can get them wiped, upgraded, and ready to be redistributed. Another aspect of what we're doing, working with in terms of the skills and education, is working very closely with Kirklees College. I have referred to them specifically because we have a very good relationship with them, and prior to the pandemic, we were looking at rolling some courses out for residents, etc. We have been able to do a few pilots, but we've not really been able to do anything at scale. But at the point we get back to normal, we'll be looking to provide courses in council and local community buildings that will cover IT literacy skills from beginning up to more advanced digital citizens. And obviously that would include an education around security and best practice online. I suppose the link there is back to the Dewsbury hubs. That will be a place where we would hope that we could start to offer the types of courses that again would be about our IT literacy, and especially when we learn more and come to sort of conferences like this to learn more about the emphasis on making sure that we do, get across the security aspect. Another little project that's hopefully be launched very soon is around the IT buddies. So looking for locally trained volunteers who can assist residents with technology queries, and again to not just to help them to navigate tablets and devices, but also to emphasise internet safety and best practice when and where we can. And we know that from our partnerships with local voluntary people. There are volunteers out there doing this kind of thing, but we want to help try and bring some scale to this, because I think we only dipping our toe in the water about people who do need some help, etc. So we are looking to provide sustainable solutions and couple that with skills and education package that promotes good IT literacy skills. But does, again, we don't want to take the fun out of being online, but we do need to keep raising the awareness of the associated risks of being online, and particularly things like cybersecurity and internet scams that have been talked about today. So just going back to the actual solution, the solution that we've got in terms of from a technical perspective, the devices that we provide, they will all run as a managed sort of guest session. So they clear all an individual's personal data after use, and on those devices that we provide, they are protected against viruses and have internet content filtering enabled for potentially sort of offensive material. And we also make sure they follow some of the prevent guidelines. Again, this is trying to sort of match all this up for ourselves in Kirklees. We don't want to control what a user. We think that a device is there to connect to the internet and should be about the positive things. But when you take a step back, we don't want to control the use. We want people to have the maximum use of being connected. But we recognise that there's a balance between the functionality and user safety. And again, just using the model that we've got, which again is other methods of doing it, but obviously we have an opportunity to put links onto desktops where we can give people links to advice about security and things like that and what to look out for. And we can keep that quite fluid and current as well, because we can do something at the back end. So from a Kirklees perspective, could we just go to the last slide? Thank you. Oh, thank you. So on the last slide, I suppose where we are, and again, this is particularly about Kirklees, but I hope it links to what we've talked about today. Is that what would be ideal is to know the exact demand that exists out there in the community, but that's not realistic. But the knowledge that we have got from our tactical responses and the ongoing responses is definitely building a picture of needs and suitable solutions. And we're now able to link those in a sort of a place-based way across Kirklees. So what we are doing is continue to meet the known demand, but we are confident that as we understand the demands, that will lead to new demands emerging. So by continuing to map what we know, we'll be more confident that we're understanding the degree of risk in a place or the degree of risk to a different group, etc. And then that should ensure that we become more confident and better at planning how we meet the greatest needs. But when I look at that and think about that, it's a bit like the ideal is that we meet sort of all the needs that we come across and actually find out what all those needs are. But in terms of that ecosystem that we want to create, we want to have a sustainable, widespread supply of gifted and/or loan devices with affordable connectivity and/or places with free connectivity, so community buildings, council buildings, but that actually sort of champions access to training for skills and education and keeps the emphasis on safety and knowledge of cybersecurity, etc. But also to use the partnerships like the Kirklees Digital Partnership and partnerships like this to understand and highlight the known scams that are there for not only Kirklees residents but the whole population. But also for us to continue to learn more and be there as sort of an advisor and enabler around suitability of IT and make sure that we've always got this eye on the safety aspect. Okay, that's me. Thank you very much.
Mark, thank you. That was absolutely terrific. I have to say, people have spoken really quickly towards the end of this afternoon, and it's been the fastest 2 hours of my life, I think, because it's been absolutely jam-packed with really useful information. Mark, thank you very, very much. We are, I am aware, 3 minutes over, and we haven't addressed any questions yet. And I can see that people are beginning to leave. I hope you've really enjoyed it. But if you can stay, then I was going to ask the participants, the speakers, to join us and just address some of the very quickly address some of the questions that have been asked. So if you can stay, great. This session will be recorded until we close the session anyway. So if you then get a recording of the session, you'll get the questions and answer bit at the end, even if you've had to leave. So I've got Ian, Andrew, Deb with me. So let's just see what we can do about the questions. There are a lot of questions about whether the slides will be available. Yes, they will. There are lots of links on the chat as well, which we'll also get sent out to you. Apologies to those people who say they've not been able to see anything. We have had the visibility on the system, so I'm not sure where that problem has arisen. And there was someone who said they were having real problems hearing our apologies. Again, there's no way of knowing how your device is interacting with the platform. I'm very, very sorry for that, but hopefully the recording should be audible. And I've also now got Danielle here as well. Hang on a minute, there's somebody else hidden in the corner that I can't see because
Peter,
yes, Deb, you've just moved to the corner, Deb. That's fine. Okay, so I know who we've got now. I'll disappear off screen and then perhaps I can see all of you. Can we address this question from Councillor Ahmed from Bradford Council's Dementia? He's a Bradford Council Dementia champion. I'm interested in seeing how we can help people living with dementia be internet safe whilst allowing them the freedom to live a normal life without restrictions. We know a lot of people living with, hang on a minute, I'm just trying to follow this down. A lot of people who have been internet scammed. The laws are in place to prosecute organisations who bombard people with online requests for information. And other than the normal processes, what else can we do to allow this vulnerable group to continue to live a normal life online without the fear of being scammed, cheated, cleared out, harassed, etc.? So any thoughts on that? And I wonder if Mark Hollingdale is still with us, because Mark, you mentioned dementia as well in your presentation. I just wonder if you're still with us and had any thoughts about that. Who'd like to have a shot at that one? Deb, any thinking around that? Danielle, anything?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I was thinking is, if you look at the Bradford Council campaign, the Make Sure It All Adds Up, what they've tried to do there is put the key messages in really simple ways. So there was an ABC, and there was a 5 ways to stop rumours and things like that. So that could be one way to kind of print off the Bradford Council Make Sure It All Adds Up campaigns, because they're purposefully very short and easy to remember. And then, you know, I mean, it's something I feel very strongly about. My mum actually has dementia. And, you know, I know that it is something that, you know, a lot of people will be thinking about. I think it'd be a good idea for us to ask maybe a charity like Alzheimer's UK if they've got any specialist information on that, actually. Because internet security is such a key thing in the news at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised. So that's something I'll definitely be looking at.
Yes, the joining the dots again, isn't it? Deb, anything you wanted to add?
No, just, I mean, I think, you know, keeping messages simple, and I think a sort of if in doubt, don't, you know, it is sort of the one to go with. And without giving too sort of too negative a perspective on the world, or to fill people with fear and foreboding, it's just getting that message out that the internet, you know, is a very useful tool, but it is also, you know, it's a mechanism that, you know, vast amounts of malevolent forces are gathered on a global scale. You know, from phoning you up to tell you your internet's not working, to, you know, have you had a car accident? There's an absolute huge amount of it, and I think so many of us are experiencing loneliness and isolation it's really nice if someone gets in touch, you know. So it's almost like, well, have a chat if you must, but don't, you know, absolutely don't.
Yeah, I think
No
that's
one
a very good point.
with a genuine offer, they don't. And that's the message to get across, I think.
Yeah, it's a problem that a lot of my friends are having too. Now, there's a question here I want to move on to. I coordinate AWOC York, Aging Without Children, and the most urgent need is for ongoing buddy support, again, something that Mark mentioned, to try and ease the total frustration and stress while trying to cope with new technology. You've lived the last 60 or 70 years without. Providing the gadget is just the start of the journey. Someone at the end of the phone is vital, and that comes from Sue Lister. So again, I think that's more of a comment really than a question, but it might be something. Ian, you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to comment on that because I know Penny Hutchinson from York Council, who's also on the webinar. We've been chatting. So Sue, if you get in touch with Penny Hutchinson and vice versa, you probably get some information through that in York Council. But thank you very much for being here and for your comment.
Thank you. And a question for Deb, Ian, Andrew. I work with adults with learning disabilities. Do you have any easy read versions of your handouts? In fact, your amazing handouts. So any, I don't know if anyone can add anything on that.
Well, I'd encourage the person to have a look at them on issue, because they are designed to be accessible to really young children, to people whose first language is not English, and also to people who struggle with literacy. Now, those three groups that's a lot of people. So we've really kept the words to a minimum, and tried to make the the layout and everything accessible. So we'd actually welcome your feedback if you have a look on issue, and if there's more that we could be doing to widen the accessibility, we'd be really pleased to hear from you.
Great, thank you very much. Last question: what happened to Hull coin? Could it be resurrected?
I
don't know.
It would have been great to have Peter. Yeah, Peter.
Yes.
Peter on there. I know that initially, because Peter is from Hull, and I know he started that over in Hull. So Alan from Hull Credit Union, I know you've answered that question. I'm personally not sure. I'll probably try
Perhaps
and connect
you can
you
put in
with
touch.
them. I will indeed.
Yeah, great. Okay.
I will indeed.
Well, I think that is all the questions, except when
There was just one
slides
more came in. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just one more came in from James. Digital inclusion requires people who have a desire to use knowledge, capability, equipment, and critically data and Wi-Fi. Does the panel have any suggestions how we can collaborate to make data and Wi-Fi available to all? I did say we could pick it up, after, or pick it up direct with him, but it was the only one that was there.
There'd be one for Andrew. Andrew's from Bradford anyway, a Bradfordian working here. So, Andrew, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really funny actually, just to address the first question, because I didn't, around the thing around dementia and vulnerability specifically. I come from a technology perspective, and I think it's really important to acknowledge the role of technology in some of the things that are happening, because certainly in the things that we're building now, the ability to recognize someone's face or to be able to start to identify people using biometrics and things like that to protect people's information. So if you flip it the other way around, people are being asked to do things. And actually, we shouldn't forget the fact that whilst dementia, for example, is a really useful example of someone who may be in a more vulnerable position, actually, it isn't just vulnerable people who are being scammed on these kind of things. It's sort of younger people who may not be suffering from any sort of issues whatsoever. They're just caught in the moment and caught out on something that happens to be happening in front of them. And I think the one thing that was sort of mentioned was urgency. A lot of the applications that are being brought out now, a lot of the online and digital services for banks are slowing the process down by making you say something into the app and say something into the camera or whatever, and sort of trying to facially recognize you and all that sort of stuff. So I think from a technology perspective, we've got a lot to do to protect people when they're in that position, to make sure that their personal information is protected and that kind of thing. In terms of data, it's a massive challenge around everything. One of our investors is Telefonica, i.e. O2, and we've been working with them for a long time on the idea that you try and sort of provide assets to people, provide data to people, and the model seems to be shifting away from charging people for a lot of data, especially with 5G and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's really important to hook up with bigger organisations like that. Actually, BT, I know, are particularly open to conversations about it, but O2 and companies like that are around the fact that they have warehouses full. I mean, they won't be happy with me telling you that they have warehouses full of older technology that you or I would think was great, that they can't do anything with, and they're always open to kind of approaches from organisations and councils to work out good ways of being able to distribute it. So I'm happy to make.
Can I just ask a naive question, Andrew? You say that older technology is great, but actually newer technology is much more intuitive, shall we say, and much easier for people to use. So, at what point do we really not want the older technology, and we'd like everybody to have access to the newer technology?
That's a really good question. So it's not the technology that's great, though. It's the interface that you create on it. It's the experience that you create. So we, for example, I described our app earlier to somebody in a really random way as being built like Fisher-Price. I mean, Ian and I have worked together on a project called LifeSavers, where it was 7-year-olds who were giving us feedback on what they thought about the interface, because it's a school bank for primary school children. And I've never seen a grown developer look so miserable and unhappy at being fed back to by a 7-year-old being told that his interface looked rubbish. And that kind of stuff is great, because if you can build it for someone who's 7 years old, who can just sort of press all the buttons and know exactly where everything is, actually you find that more and more that becomes the way. Really interesting stuff is stuff like your finger size doesn't change, but the screen gets smaller, so you make the buttons bigger. You don't sort of, silly things like that. But actually, it's really interesting as well. Like the accessibility stuff. My son's just been diagnosed with severe dyslexia, and I had no idea that there were fonts designed specifically to deal with people who are dyslexic, that are easier to read and different colours on backgrounds. A whole bunch of stuff that just absolutely changes, that you can do in technology in a second. You can allow the end user to change that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things that can be done to support that kind of thing. I know it's more difficult on paper because you just printed it, but I think technology plays a certain role in some of that as well.
Well, I know I've taken you down a rabbit hole that we could spend a really long time getting out of.
No pun intended, Liz.
Because we've had some of these conversations before. I think what I am going to do is to say, right, we've now run till nearly 3:20. You've been very kind, those of you who are still with us, to give us an extra 20 minutes. It's been absolutely fascinating afternoon as far as I'm concerned. Thank you ever so much to Ian, Deb, Andrew and Danielle, who are still here, and to all of our speakers, including the Mayor, Councillor Doreen Lee, who was with us earlier, to Amy-Anne Fairhurst, who's had to leave, and Peter Kemp, Ros Davies and Mark Hollingdale. Thank you all very much indeed, and thank you for taking part. And thank you, it has to be said, to Jackie for making things run smoothly in the background. So
thank you, Jackie.
Jackie, you didn't throw us out. I'll say safe home.
Yes, thank you. There's lots of thank yous as well, so I'll distribute all the comments over to Ian. But thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's worth the time. Yeah, thank you. Bye. And to lead the session, if you just click on the file in the top on the control panel, file and then leave webinar, and I'll help those along. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ta-ra.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.